Welcome to the Horse Council of BC Emergency Preparedness for Horse Owners educational video series. This series is intended to provide information on emergency preparedness for horse owners across the province. Module 1 is going to provide information on prevention and developing an emergency management plan for your farm or facility. In response to the unprecedented fires of 2017, Horse Council BC activated the Horse Council BC Animal Disaster Relief Fund to help offset costs for those who suffered losses due to the wildfires, as well as those volunteers who incurred expenses for relocating and housing displaced horses. These guidelines were produced as an additional free resource to provide horse owners across the province with guidance on emergency preparedness. As we are all aware, BC has dealt with multiple fire and weather-related emergencies and disasters the past several years. Forest fires and flooding in particular have significantly impacted horses and their owners across the province. Other emergency events that can threaten the equine population include drought, extreme heat, ice storms, barn fires, severe thunderstorms or wind events, and motor vehicle incidents. It is the hope of HCBC that through the raised awareness and education provided in this program, the negative impact on the animals and their owners can be greatly reduced. Emergency Management BC is guided by 4 pillars: mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery. This video series follows the 4 pillars of Emergency Management BC and is broken into 3 modules: prevention and preparedness, response, and recovery. Each one of these aspects are equally important to an efficient and effective emergency preparedness plan. Emergency planning should include steps to help prevent emergencies from occurring. We all know prevention is less stressful and more economical. Do you know the risks on your farm and the steps you can take to minimize that risk? We will start with general farm maintenance for your yard, your barnyards, and your pastures. You will need to keep the grass mowed around all buildings to reduce the fuel for fires. Cut down any at-risk trees that have died or become weakened. Clean out all culverts to allow for unobstructed flow of water. Monitor the water levels around your farm and at nearby water sources. Limit any burning activities, including burn barrels, to windless days. For more information on creating a fire-safe yard, go to firesmartbc.ca. For facilities and equipment, you will want to inspect all wiring in your barns. All barns should be properly wired by a professional and continually inspected for exposed wires. Most barn fires are electrical in origin. Make sure all gates are in good repair and swing freely and secure shut. Inspect any fences for damage before putting animals out on pasture or into corrals. Pick up or secure any equipment or junk that can become flying projectiles. Clean out all barns, stalls, and corrals and keep them clean. Never store manure piles next to buildings. They can self-combust and cause a fire. Ensure all hazardous material is properly stored in a safe area. Many farmland fires are started by farm equipment, so keep all your equipment well maintained. All indoor housing facilities must provide adequate ventilation to prevent heat stress and ammonia buildup. Ensure all transport vehicles and trailers are in good repair and mechanically sound. And do not allow snow to build up on the roof of your barns or stables. In regards to feed and water, make sure you secure feedstuff as early as possible if drought conditions were present over the summer. Check all your feed sources for mold and other damage. Never store the hay next to buildings, as it can self-combust and cause a fire. If you store hay inside, make sure you test it for moisture and heating on a regular basis. Your animals will need to consume more water than normal in extreme heat, so make sure they have enough water to help mitigate heat stress and dehydration. You will need to test your water if your source is at risk for contamination or toxicity due to drought conditions. Inspect all water heaters and automatic waterers at the beginning of winter and check them regularly to ensure they are working. And ensure you have enough feedstuff to get through the winter and the ability to feed the animals in harsh winter conditions. As part of your prevention program for your horses, you need to make sure that you vaccinate all animals for disease prevention. All your horses should be trained to easily load in a trailer. Keep halters at each stall or in an easily accessible area for pasture and paddocks. This will allow you to quickly catch your horses. All horses should be taught to lead with just a rope around their neck for the instances where halters are not available. The code of practice for the care and handling of equine requires that all horse owners provide animals with protection from extreme temperatures, including extreme heat. Sources of shade must be provided to prevent heat stress, and for extreme cold, horses must be provided with protection, which can include windbreaks and bedding. And ensure you have enough bedding to get you through a hard winter. Although impossible to predict, there is no doubt that preparing for emergencies is important. The ability to make rapid decisions and being ready to manage the situation if it occurs is extremely important. Having a plan in place is important to minimizing the impact of emergency situations on human health, the welfare of the animals, property, and economic losses. We all want to keep our families, animals, and property safe during an emergency, and developing a plan for your farm will help mitigate the risk. You should start by identifying the emergency events that are most likely to occur in your location. Once identified, take time to think about how they will impact you and your animals. Possible emergency events in BC include tornadoes, building or structure collapse, such as a barn or stable, or a livestock event center, such as a riding arena, overland, flash, or surface flooding, thunderstorms, including lightning strikes and high winds, a winter storm or blizzard, an ice storm, a grass or prairie fire, a barn fire, forest fires, drought, power outages, hazardous material spills from a production plant, railway, or by land transport, water contamination, or a motor vehicle incident. Write down on your preparedness plan what events are most likely to occur in your area as these will be the foundation for your preparedness plan and your prevention program. Taking action to develop a plan and knowing where to start may be overwhelming. This module is intended to help you assess risk and plan, prepare, and respond to emergency situations. The plan does not need to be complicated, as the purpose of it is to give you the tools and ability to react quickly and efficiently to an emergency situation. Each farm should have an emergency information and contact sheet specific to your farm. This will be a resource for yourself, your family, and any staff, but it should also be shared with your local fire department in case they have to respond to an emergency event at your farm. Here is an example of the information you should include, starting with your farm name and family name, your legal land description, your 911 address, and your premise ID. The British Columbia Premise Identification Program was established to reduce the impact that livestock disease or natural disaster emergencies had on animals, their owners, and their properties. It became mandatory in 2022 to register your farm or facility within the province and is a free and confidential service. The Premise ID program has proven successful in helping locate livestock during disasters. To register your farm or facility or to find more information on Premise ID, go to the web address shown on the screen or Google Premise ID BC. Next, you should include your phone numbers and who to contact in case of an emergency. Your veterinarian and insurance company information should be listed also. You will want to include the location of any of your fire extinguishers and what their expiration dates are. If you have a backup generator, that should be on the list also. You will need to indicate what your water source is, whether it is well, city, rural municipality, or dugout. Not just for your own awareness, but also so fire will know what they have available for water in case of a fire. Everyone should be aware of where all your power shutoffs are for all buildings and your house. And finally, what are your known farm hazards? Examples would be propane tanks, fuel tanks, any flammables, and also any dangerous animals that first responders should be aware of. You will need to have an inventory of how many animals you have, especially if you are a larger farm or facility with a significant amount of horses or a farm with multiple types of species, such as a cattle ranch with horses. This number is required to determine the amount of feed and water needed, how many trailers you need to evacuate, and selection of evacuation sites. This list should also include where the horses are located, such as which pasture, paddock, or barn. For larger facilities that have multiple stall barns, your emergency preparedness plans should include which animals would be considered priority in evacuation events. As an example, in a barn fire, you will most likely have very limited time, a matter of minutes, to evacuate any horses, and unfortunately, you may be unable to actually evacuate them all. For this reason, the horses that you would consider your priority for evacuations should be stalled closest to the exterior door for quick and easy access. We realize this is a difficult decision for anyone to make, but it must be something you consider when stalling animals. Along with the number of horses you have, you should also have a means of identification for each one and proof of ownership or custody. This can include registration papers, a bill of sale, tattoos, microchips, freeze or hot iron brands, or photographs. You may be required to show proof of ownership at an evacuation facility or if your animals have been rescued or recovered by a provincial agency or organization. For shelter-in-place situations, all horse owners or caretakers should have at least 72 hours of feed and water supplies available on farm at any given time. Keep in mind that if your water is provided via a well, you will need power to draw the water out of the well. No power equals no water. Here is an example of how to calculate how much hay and water you will need for 72 hours. You multiply the number of horses by the pounds of hay they each require a day and multiply that times 3 days. You will need to make sure you know how much your bales of hay weigh for an accurate calculation. For situations in which evacuation is required, you will first need to determine what your capacity for evacuating your animals are. If you have 8 horses and only have a 3-horse trailer, you will need to have access to more trailers, or there may be situations where you are only able to evacuate 3 horses, and you will need to make the decision of which 3 horses that will be. As with shelter-in-place recommendations, you should have 72 hours worth of feed to take with you. Do not assume that the evacuation site is going to have feed available for the animals. Keep it simple. All your horses really need is hay. Bringing along all their grain, supplements, etc. will overcomplicate care of the horse during an emergency event. For hay, you should have access to small square bales that can be easily transported and fed. Even if you feed round bales on your farm, they are almost impossible to easily transport with your horses during an evacuation. Depending on the facility you evacuate to, there may or may not be water available. There also may be water, but not enough for the number of animals housed there, or it may not be potable. You may also need to bring your own water buckets, tubs, or troughs. Your emergency preparedness plan should include possible evacuation sites, their location, and the contact information for the site. Other information that is good to document includes water availability and if you will need to bring your own penning. In major events that are region-wide, there may be evacuation sites set up by your local authorities or industry groups. For smaller, more isolated events, there may not be any official evacuation sites. Considerations when determining a place to evacuate to include the number of animals you need to evacuate, accessibility to the site, safety of the site, the availability of potable water and power, and does it provide protection from extreme temperatures. In the event of a flood, your evacuation sites must be pastures or facilities that are on higher ground and remain accessible during the flood. And finally, your plan should be reviewed annually and updated as needed to make sure you have the most current information as things do change. And we will wrap up Module 1 with a quick review of the key points. Prevention is part of emergency preparedness planning. Farm maintenance is a major part of risk mitigation. Having a plan in place is important to minimizing the impact of emergency situations on human health, animal welfare, property, and economic losses. Your preparedness plan should be specific to your farm or facility. And your plan should be annually reviewed and updated as needed. We have now reached the end of Module 1. You can proceed to Module 2, Response.